Subscribe to Teckoh on YouTube or you will forever be a bot at Fortnite.
Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be diving into the endgame, and I'll be going over a bunch of tips, information, and strategies that are going to help you be more consistent and win more matches, specifically in arena and tournaments. By the end of this video, and after putting all of these tips into practice, you'll be able to start dominating the endgame no matter which mode you're playing. But with that said, I'm not going to waste any time, let's just get straight into it. Anyway guys, with that said, the first topic I want to cover in this video is when you should be going for impact frags, also known as refreshes in endgame. An impact frag is simply a kill that you get with the goal of refreshing something. Oftentimes these are your materials, ammo, or just your general loot. Now, in endgame, I typically recommend going for impact frags as much as you possibly can. In fact, you'll want to be constantly on the lookout even if you're totally stacked, because you never know when an opportunity might present itself, and the difference between the people who end up dominating in endgame and the people who go down are that the people who consistently dominate are the ones who always take advantage of opportunities that come their way. With that said, the main reason that you're going to want to impact frag is to refresh your materials, and in terms of materials, I typically recommend starting to really look for kills. So to specifically focus on kills once you're around 500 to 600 materials. This is a good range where you'll still have materials to continue playing normally, so you don't have to put yourself in a scuffed situation to get a refresh, but at the same time you don't have a perfect situation where there's no reason to go for kills at all. The main way I typically get refreshes in endgame is by getting ahead of the zone, especially in moving zones, and looking down or behind me to find players who are struggling so I can pick up easy kills on them. Another awesome trick to grab refreshes, especially in team modes, is to have somebody carry a harpoon gun. So if you find any loot piles or materials in the open, you can harpoon them from the safety of your own box. That's one of the easiest ways to quickly get a refresh without taking much risk at all. The second topic I want to briefly touch on when it comes to endgame is how you can save on materials. Now, obviously, if you run out of materials, then you can always go for an impact frag, but optimally, you'll want to try and save materials so you're not forced to go for impact frags every 20 seconds. Right now, I'm going to go over 3 tips that I personally recommend, which you can use to easily save materials and put yourself into a better situation in endgame. The first tip, and one of the biggest tips I have to save more materials, is to use more mobility to rotate. Carrying mobility into the endgame, especially things like launch pads, crash pads, or even mythic mobility like the grappler or shockwave launcher if you have one, it's the easiest way to save your materials while you're rotating and playing out the endgame. Another option you can always consider as well is staying back and waiting for other players to use their mobility. This works especially well in stacked endgames since somebody is bound to use a launch pad or start crash padding pretty much every game. Really, it's just a matter of being patient, but also having a backup plan in case things go south, or obviously if nobody uses their mobility. The second tip to save materials in endgame is to stay ahead of the zone and use low material tarps. The low material tarps I'm referring to are mainly the classic triangle tarp, which consists of just a floor, wall, and a ramp against that wall. A floor ramp tarp, which, as the name implied, is just a floor and a ramp. These low material tarps allow you to stay properly covered the entire time, while also saving a lot of materials. And the final tip I have to save your materials in endgame is to reuse other players' builds. These can be things like old tarps, bases, and things of that nature. Obviously, you'll have to be extremely cautious when you do this, but if you manage to do it safely and do it at the right time, this can easily save you a ton of materials. Next up, I want to discuss a more advanced topic that most of you probably struggle with, and that's layering. Layering is one of those concepts that most competitive players sort of know, but can't really apply properly and don't really know in any depth. In endgame, there are 3 basic layers, which are low ground, mid ground, and high ground. The majority of the time, you're going to be playing mid ground, but oftentimes if you're doing very well and potentially winning, then you'll end up playing high ground, or you might end up playing low ground if you're scuffed. To start off, high ground, quite obviously, is the place you'll usually want to be when it comes to later zones. Typically in solos, you'll want to start looking for high ground around the 7th zone, trying to find opportunities where the current high ground player is in a scuffed situation and you have an opportunity to take it, given you have enough materials and other loot to actually take it and maintain it. Playing high ground after you actually take it is usually as simple as connecting to builds to stay structurally sound, looking down to get kills and tags on the people below, and obviously defending your high ground from other players who might try to take it. I'm going to skip right to low ground next. Now, low ground is the last place you're basically going to want to be in endgame. Usually the players on low ground are the ones that are in scuff situations, and more often than not it's just a 50-50 fest where people just go as their last resort to stay in the game. The only time you're going to want to play low ground is if you're totally scuffed and if you have to take a 50-50 to keep your game going, or if it's just simply not possible to continue playing mid or high ground for any reason. One important tip is that whenever you end up on low ground, your instant goal should be to get back up on a good layer as fast as possible. You don't want to waste any time on the low ground. Next up is mid ground, and I saved this one for last because mid ground is usually the layer that you're going to be playing for the majority of your endgame. During an optimal endgame, you'll typically play mid ground until the 7th or 8th zone, until you manage to take height and eventually win the game. Now, obviously that's the general goal, but that's not going to happen every single game, but the majority of games will play out with most of your time being on mid ground regardless. When you're in a decent situation in terms of materials and other loot, your main goal should be to stay on mid ground, preferably the higher part of mid ground, and look both down and behind you to grab impact frags and pick up extra stuff. Your main goals should be staying ahead of zone, keeping a good inventory, picking up kills, and finding a chance to take height. Overall, understanding layering and knowing when and how to play each layer is going to help you quite a bit when it comes to being consistent in endgame. Using the information from this section, plus the information that you'll inevitably learn through your own gameplay and your own VOD reviews, you should be able to optimize your playstyle and take advantage of good layering in your gameplay. The last thing I want to cover in this video is how you can take height in stacked endgames to eventually close out the match and hopefully win. Obviously, there are a ton of different situations in which you can take height, so I can't cover every single one in this video, but I'm going to try and go over the main stuff that you'll need to know. One of the main things you're going to want to do during endgame is constantly look upwards to see what the situation of the high ground player is. Your most optimal time to take height in solos, and one that I want you to take note of right now, is going to be the 7th and 8th zone. You won't really want to go any earlier because you'll likely run out of materials before the game ends, and any later you might not have enough room to work with, and the high ground player is typically in a good situation by then. What you'll want to do in order to take height is to spot when high ground is vulnerable and take advantage of it. One of the main reasons you'll want to play the upper mid ground area is so you can take height a bit quicker and have an easier time spotting when they're in a bad situation, which you can take advantage of. That, of course, is along with the ability to look down and get impact frags easier. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope it helps you all out so you can start becoming more consistent and placing higher in endgame, whether you're playing tournaments, scrims, or arena. Start practicing the tips I discussed and utilizing them in your games, and I guarantee that with a bit of time and practice you'll be dominating endgame much more consistently. Let me know down in the comments below what you guys thought of this video, and also let me know if you'd like to see another endgame video where I can go more in depth on how you can play specific zones and rotations. And last thing before I let you guys go, if you want to help support me and the channel, consider using code Teckoh in your item shop. It's completely free and it seriously helps me out a ton, so thank you all who'd use it. With that said guys, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.